All right, let's see. Chapter 67, Sisyphus. Sisyphus, son of Aeolus, married Atlas's daughter Merope, the Pleiad, who bore him Glaucus, Ornithian, and Sinon, and owned a fine herd of cattle on the Isthmus of Corinth. B. Near him lived Autolycus, son of Chion, whose twin brother Philemon was begotten by Apollo, though Autolycus himself claimed Hermes as his father. C. Now Autolycus was a past master in theft, Hermes having given him the power of metamorphosing whatever beast he stole from horned to unhorned or from black to white and contrariwise. Thus, although Sisyphus noticed that his own herds grew steadily smaller while those of Autolycus's increased, he was unable at first to convict him of theft, and therefore one day engraved the inside of all his cattle's hooves with the monogram SS, or some say with the words stolen by Autoclius. That night Autoclius helped himself as usual, and at dawn hoofprints along the road provided Sisyphus with sufficient evidence to summon neighbors in witness of the theft. He visited Autoclius' stable, recognized his stolen beasts by their marked hooves, and leaving his witnesses to remonstrate with the thief, hurried around the house, entered by the portal, and while the argument was in progress outside, seduced Autoclius' daughter Anticlia, wife to Laertes the Argive. She bore him Odysseus, the manner of whose conception is enough to account for the cunning he habitually showed and for his nickname Hypsipylon. D. Sisyphus founded Ephyra, afterwards known as Corinth, and people it with men sprung from mushrooms, unless it be true that Medea gave him the kingdom as a present. His contemporaries knew him as the worst knave on earth, granting only that he promoted Corinthian commerce and navigation. E. When on the death of Aeolus, Salmoneus usurped the Thessalian throne, Sisyphus, who was the rightful heir, consulted the Delphic oracle and was told, "Sire, children on your niece, they will avenge you." He therefore seduced Tyro, Salmoneus' daughter, who, happening to discover that his motive was not love for her, but hatred for her father, killed the two sons she had borne him. Sisyphus entered then the marketplace of Larissa, produced the dead bodies, falsely accused Salmoneus of incest and murder, and had him expelled from Thessaly. F. After Zeus's abduction of Aegina, her father, the river god Asopus, came to Corinth in search of her. Sisyphus knew well what had happened to Aegina, but would not reveal anything unless Asopus undertook to supply the citadel of Corinth with the perennial spring. Asopus accordingly made the spring Perine rise behind Aphrodite's temple, where there are now images of the goddess armed, of the sun, and of Eros the archer. Then Sisyphus told him all he knew. G. Zeus, who had narrowly escaped Asopus' revenge, ordered his brother Hades to fetch Sisyphus down from Tartarus and punish him everlastingly for his betrayal of divine secrets. Yet Sisyphus would not be daunted. He cunningly put Hades himself in handcuffs by persuading him to demonstrate their use, and then quickly locking them. Thus Hades was kept a prisoner in Sisyphus' house for some days, an impossible situation because nobody could die, even men who had been beheaded or cut to pieces, until at last Ares, whose interests were threatened, came hurrying up, set him free, and delivered Sisyphus into his clutches. H. Sisyphus, however, kept another trick in reserve. Before descending to Tartarus, he instructed his wife Merope not to bury him, and on reaching the palace of Hades, went straight to Persephone and told her that as an unburied person he had no right to be there, but should have been left on the far side of the river Styx. Let me return to the upper world, he pleaded, arrange for my burial and avenge the neglect shown me. My presence here is most irregular. I will be back within 3 days. Persephone was deceived and granted his request, but as soon as Sisyphus found himself once again under the light of the sun, he repudiated his promise to Persephone. Finally, Hermes was called upon to hail him back by force. It may have been because he had injured Salmoneus, or because he had betrayed Zeus's secret, or because he had always lived by robbery and often murdered unsuspecting travelers. Some say that it was Theseus who put an end to Sisyphus's career, though this is not generally mentioned among Theseus's feats. At any rate, Sisyphus was given an exemplary punishment. The judges of dead showed him a huge block of stone, identical in size with that into which Zeus had turned himself when fleeing from Asopus, and ordered him to roll it up the brow of a hill and topple it down the farther slope. He has never yet succeeded in doing so. As soon as he has almost reached the summit, he is forced back by the weight of the shameless stone, which bounces to the very bottom once more, where he wearily retrieves it and must begin all over again, though sweat bathes his limbs and a cloud of dust rises above his head. J. Merope, ashamed to find herself the only played with a husband in the underworld, and a criminal too, deserted her 6 starry sisters in the night sky and has never been seen since. And as the whereabouts of Nelos's tomb on the Corinthian isthmus was a secret which Sisyphus refused to divulge even to Nestor, so the Corinthians are now equally reticent when asked for the whereabouts of Sisyphus's own burial place. Yikes! Sure. Footers 1. Sisyphus. Though the Greeks understood it to mean very wise, it's spelt Sisyphus by Hesychius, and is thought to be a Greek variant of Tisup, the Hittite sun god, identical with Atabyros, the sun god of Rhodes, whose sacred animal was a bull. Bronze statuettes and reliefs of this bull dating from the 14th century BC have been found, marked with a scepter and 2 discs on the flank and with a trifle on the haunch. Raids on the sun god's marked cattle are a commonplace in Greek myth. Odysseus' companions made them. So also did Alcyoneus and his contemporary Hercules, but Autolycus' use of magic in his theft from Sisyphus recalls the story of Jacob and Laban. Jacob, like Autolycus, had the gift of turning cattle to whatever color he wanted and thus diminished Laban's flocks. The cultural connection between Corinth and Canaan, which is shown in the myths of Nissus. Oedipus, Alcathos, and Melicertes may be Hittite. Alconius also came from Corinth. 2. Jesus. Sisyphus' shameless stone was originally a sun disk, and the hill up which he rolled it is the vault of heaven. This made a familiar enough icon. The existence of the Corinthian sun cult is well established. Helios and Aphrodite are said to have held the Acropolis in succession and shared a temple there. Moreover, Sisyphus is invariably placed next to the Ioxion, or Exion, in Tartarus, and Ioxion's fire wheel is a symbol of the sun. This explains why the people of Ephyra sprang from mushrooms. Mushrooms were the ritual tinder of Ioxion's fire wheel, and the sun god demanded human burnt sacrifices to inaugurate his year. Anticleia's seduction has been deduced perhaps from a picture showing Helios' marriage to Aphrodite. and the mythographer's hostility towards Sisyphus voices Hellenic disgust at the strategic planting of non-Hellenic settlements on the narrow isthmus separating the Peloponnese from Attica. His outwitting of Hades probably refers to a sacred king's refusal to abdicate at the end of his reign. To judge from the sun bull's markings, he contrived to rule for 2 great years, represented by the scepter and the sun discs, and obtained the triple goddesses' ascent, represented by the trefoil. Hypsipylon, Odysseus' nickname, is the masculine form of Hypsipyle, a title probably of the moon goddess. 3. Sisyphus and Nellus were probably buried at strategic points on the isthmus as a charm against invasion. A lacuna occurs in Hyginus' account of Sisyphus' revenge on Salmoneus. I have supplied a passage which makes sense of the story. 4. Perenne, the spring on the citadel of Corinth where Bellerophon took Pegasus to drink, had no efflux and never failed. Perenne was also the name of a fountain outside the city gate on the way from the marketplace to Lechium, where Perenne of the Osirs, whom the mythographers described as the daughter of Achilleus or of Obalus or of Oesopus and Metope, was said to have been turned into a spring when she wept for her son Senchurus, spotted serpent, who Artemis had unwittingly killed. Corinthian bronze took its characteristic color from being plunged red hot into the spring. 5. One of the 7 Pleiades disappeared in early classical times, and her absence had to be explained. 6. A question remains. Was the double S really the monogram of Sisyphus? The icon illustrating the myth probably showed him examining the tracks of the stolen sheep and cattle, which, since they parted the hoof, were formalized as, looks like, 2 C's. This sign stood for double S's in the earliest Greek script and could also be read as the conjoined halves of the lunar month and all that these implied: waxing, waning, increase, decline, blessing, and cursing. Animals which parted the hoof were self-dedicated to the moon. They are the sacrifices ordained at the new moon festivals in Leviticus, and the double S will therefore have referred to Selene the moon, alias Aphrodite, rather than to Sisyphus, who, as Sun King, merely held her sacred herd in trust. The figure C's, double C's, representing the full moon, as distinguished from O, representing the simple sun disk, was marked on each flank of the sacred cow, which directed Cadmus to the site of Thebes. I love it when they throw a lot of names in there. I love it.